Hello everyone, my name is Pravina and I'm a final year economics student. It is an absolute honor to be chairing the debate for today, and I hope you are as excited as I am. We have a very interesting motion, which is this house believes that economics is useless. I love economics, but this is one question that really needs to be answered. Without further ado, I would like to invite the student debaters to take their seats.
You had to do it.
And could we now have the lecturers to take their seats? So I'll begin by introducing the debaters for today. On my left, we have the senior lecturers from the School of Economics who would be arguing for the motion. Their core argument would be that economics is useless. And for that, we have Alfred and Amrit. And on my right, with the challenging mission to debate against these very experienced lecturers, we have three students who are James, Ari, and Salman. Assisting me in my role today would be the timekeeper, Roshan. Would you please wait? Before we get into the formal business of debating, let me first inform you of the rules for today's debate. Each speaker on the proposing team, or the lecturer's team, would have 7.5 minutes to speak as they are a smaller team, while the students, or the opposing team, would have 5 minutes to present their arguments. Speakers may offer or take points of information, which are additions to arguments from opponents during the debate. Speakers have 1 minute of protected time at the start and at the end of the debate, and the opposing team can only offer points of information during this time. The timekeeper would remind you by holding placards or by ringing the bell. If the bell is rung once at the start of the debate, Can I have the bell, please? Yeah.
Let me check my phone now.
Yeah. It means that the opposing team can now ask questions. If the bell is rung once at the end of the debate, it means that the opposing team may no longer ask any questions beyond this point. If the bell is rung twice, he's obviously... it means that the speaking time is over and the speaker should wrap up their arguments. And lastly, no offensive remarks shall be made during this debate. As audience, we would love to hear what you think as well, so feel free to ask your questions to the audience, but it will only be once the formal debate is over, or in other words, once all of them have finished speaking. I will let you know when the floor is open to your questions. Before I invite the first speaker from the opposing team to present their arguments, let me first take a vote to know about your perception is about the motion. I will be repeating this vote again later to see if any of you were convinced by our very talented speakers. This voting method is known as the swing vote, the side that collects more votes by convincing a larger proportion of the audience through both sides would be considered as the most convincing team. So would those who are for the motion or those who think economics is useless, please raise your hand.
Devil's advocates. The academics. That's great.
Thank you. And would those who are against the motion or who think economics is useful, please raise your hand.
I want to point out that the head of the school did not raise his hand.
He raised it for. He raised it for useless.
Oh, yeah, for useless. Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Now I would like to invite the first speaker from the opposing team. I've been told we have to do an abstained vote. So, would those who have refrained from voting please carry up your hand? So now I'd like to invite the first speaker from the opposing team, James, to present his arguments.
That's what I'm used to. Good afternoon, everybody. Peers, esteemed and intimidating academics as well, who we seemingly have to convince. The main point that I will be espousing today is the fact that economics isn't just a discipline, it's actually a framework, a perspective that it gives that actually brings many virtues I think are actually not only more beneficial to us personally, but more beneficial for us as a community. So if we were to go back to the beginning and foundations of economics, I think it could be, the point could be made that it's more of a bringing about of the turn of liberalism in the late 18th century, so with Adam Smith being the father. But the virtues it espouses of rationalism and critical thinking and really questioning where it is you come from. And I think the point could be made that actually it's more about not only solving problems and what issues is it that we're currently facing, it's more how can we make our lives better. So if we're, the first page in your textbook, which I don't know if anybody really reads, it says that economics comes from two words in Greek, which together mean home management. I don't think that this is necessarily reflected in modern economics as it's grown over time. But as we've gone from, the original form of capitalism to going to Marxism, to going back, there's so many different questions that we've asked ourselves. How is it that we can actually improve the world in which we're living? Is society actually benefiting? Am I benefiting personally? And I think these are all reasons why we can turn to economics, even on top of other humanities where it actually bases itself off of, which I don't think it usually alludes to and accepts. It likes to think it's something rather different. And it also likes to, with its own form of language, it likes to make itself very elitist in some instances, as we probably some of us aim to become those who aid policymakers and like to hold all the power and blah blah blah. But yes, that is the argument that I shall be espousing. That through its turn of thought and its really, the questions that it really asks are really in our benefit as a society.
Thank you, James. Now I would like to call upon the lecturer from the opposing team to present the arguments.
All right. Sorry. Oh, right. Thanks. So this is going to require some audience participation. Eventually, not right now, because I believe in evidence. So have your cell phones ready. And open a browser, go to menti.com and open up that code, and I'll give you some instructions in a bit. So, okay, I'm going to begin by helping out the opposition a little bit by giving you a few reasons to think that economics is useful. Because we know economics is useful because economists have successfully predicted 9 out of the last 5 recessions. We also know that economics is useful because it's the only field in which 2 people can get a Nobel Prize for saying the opposite thing. And that's not actually just a joke. You can win a Nobel Prize you can share the same Nobel Prize for saying opposite things. That happened in 1974 when Hayek and Murdoch shared the same Nobel Prize. And we call it a science. So economics. What are some of the most important tools in economics? I would argue that perhaps the single most important concept that you can learn in economics is the idea of how to compare costs and benefits appropriately in order to make the correct decisions. And to that end, what's especially as important is the idea of opportunity cost. If you have learned one thing in your economics degree, it should be the idea of opportunity cost. That is by far the most useful thing that you can learn in economics. The idea of the opportunity cost, of course, is it's the value of your next best alternative. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer you the following test. So on menti.com, use that code, you'll see the following question. And I want you to answer this question. The question is, you have won a free ticket to see Eric Clapton. I know you guys are too young, he's a musician. Okay? This ticket has no resale value. Bob Dylan is performing on the exact same night, and that's your next best alternative activity. So you could either see Clapton or you could see Dylan. tickets to see Dylan cost $40, but you would be willing to pay $50. Okay, you'd be willing to pay $50 to see Dylan. If you want to see him, you have to buy a ticket that costs $40. You have a free ticket to see Eric Clapton. So the question is, what is the opportunity cost of seeing Eric Clapton? That's the question. So I want you all to put in your answers, and let's see how you did. All right, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to finish up your answers. I can't give you too much time because I only have 7.5 minutes, of which some amount has already passed. So, all right, let's see. Put in your last few votes, and let's see how you did. All right. I want to point out that all of you have some background in economics. All right, let's see. All right, so 17% of you got the right answer. Okay, the right answer is $10. And I also want to point out that there's a fair number of professional economists in this room. Why is that the answer? Well, the net benefit of seeing Dylan is $10. It's worth $50, it costs $40. There's no financial cost of seeing Clapton. If you want to see Clapton, that means you can't see Dylan, which is worth $10. It's not a complicated question. But don't feel too bad, because the same question was asked of 200 professional economists in 2005 at a meeting of the American Economic Association. About half of these people were from top 30 departments. These are some of the best departments in the world. These are not scrubs we're talking about. 60% of them had taught economics at the introductory level. Okay? And yet, less than a quarter of them got the answer right. That is worse than random. Okay? Monkeys would literally have done that.
We're not calling you
But it's worse than that, okay? Because the same question was asked of undergraduate students, about 400 undergraduate students. Some of them had a background in economics, some of them had no background in economics. And it turns out that the ones who had no background did better than the ones who had some background. I want to point out that there's no statistically significant difference in this study between the proportion of correct answers between people who had no background whatsoever in economics and professionally trained economists who are teaching economics courses. That's a disturbing result. What do we take from this? One, you don't know economics, although you studied economics. Two, economists don't know economics, although we studied economics. And sure enough, studying economics seems to make you worse at economics. What the hell kind of discipline is that? The people who authored the study, Ferraro and Taylor, they conclude with a rhetorical question. Can economists be relevant in the world of ideas and policy if we cannot answer simple, albeit contrived, opportunity cost questions? And, I'll leave you to answer that question yourselves. In the remaining time, I'd like to be a little bit more personal. Okay, I'm a development economist, and I'm not going to say, I'm going to make anything special about my particular field. We are also useless. This is a field I know really well, so let me just try to convince you of this. Can I ask, how am I doing in time?
5 minutes, 20 seconds.
Okay, 2 minutes, very good, sorry. I can slow down a little bit, all right. Good. So, in development economics, this is a field which is prone to fads, like fashion, okay? In the 50s and 60s, development economists were all about the big push, import substitution, central planning. In the 70s and 80s, it shifted to a more market-oriented approach. We were all about liberalization, the Washington Consensus. Then in the 90s and the 2000s, we started to say, actually, institutions are really important. Oh yeah, that's a great insight. Really, brilliant. Okay. By the way, we can't change institutions, but institutions are really important. The rule of law is really important. And these days, the randomistas are in control. Now what we like to do is we like to randomize. We like to, say, let's distribute some bed nets here, and let's start up some self-help groups, and let's see what that does to development. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that development economics has been about. It's been very faddish. Now let's compare that with the results. In green, what you see is the global population. In red, over time, over the last 200 years, is the number of people who are living in absolute poverty, less than $1 a day. That number has been decreasing dramatically in the last 30 years, a real miracle. What credit can development economists take for that? None. That contribution has been driven almost entirely by East Asian countries. These are the same countries that have been most excellent at ignoring the advice of Western economists. What have Western mainstream economists been telling them? They've been telling them liberalize, deregulate, liberalize your trade, deregulate your industries, privatize your industries. Countries like Taiwan, South Korea, China have done none of these things. And those have precisely been the countries that have grown the most and lifted the most people out of poverty. So, in conclusion, I would like to paraphrase Winston Churchill by way of Danny Roderick to say that economists are not a humble bunch, yet we have a lot to be humble about. And let me just say thank you and vote for the proposition.
Thank you, Amrit. I would now like to invite Ari from the opposing team to present his arguments.
So yeah, Amrit mentioned the principle of opportunity cost for a question that really is just badly written in English, but opportunity cost tells you so much more. I think no one here yet pays taxes, but the fact that we want lower taxes makes us realize that those taxes could be used for things like healthcare or sending your kids to school. So if you realize, or if you take the opportunity cost and apply it to more relevant things, not music concerts, I think it proves to serves to prove quite a useful tool in economics. And it's right, that's the first thing everyone learns in their economics textbook in first year. Along with that, economics has also given us things like marginal utility, which as I'm sure all of you know, helps you make decisions given how much money you have at the moment. This might be used for things like whether you pay for priority boarding or speedy security checks at airports. It might not be something I might want, but someone else might have a different preference for that. I think also economics is useful in achieving social efficiency. I think in this day and age, where a country should try to achieve social efficiency for all their citizens, given all this talk of how Trump is changing his policies, or how the Brexit is leaving for their own good. How the UK is leaving the EU for their own good. You always have these market failures in the economy which should be targeted. And an example of this might be when you have a congestion tax or a traffic tax. Driving into London sometimes takes 2 hours from Canterbury. A simple solution for this would be to charge people, say £10. The people that don't want to pay it no longer drive in. You don't have to wait in traffic. That way you get rid of the people that don't really value this driving into London, making your commute much easier. So for things like these, I think economics is very useful in understanding these policies, both at a personal level and at a societal level. Furthermore, I think government intervention, the guest speaker spoke about it, as well as to what extent they should intervene in the economy. This might be things like the NHS, which I'm sure everyone here has used at some point in their life. If you didn't have economists, you'd be paying to visit the doctor every time, and I'm guaranteed if you've tried to get an appointment or you've waited for hours and they told you to come back in 6 weeks, that wouldn't happen if you didn't have this wouldn't happen if you would have planned it out properly. Coming to conclude that, I think everyone here, for some reason, has chosen to study economics. Can I just get a show of hands? Who here has chosen it to make money at some point in their life? Bringing it back to this point, I'm guessing you guys want to work in finance or in economics. So eventually, I think economics gives you the tools to work in whatever you want. No offense to anyone, but there's a reason we study economics, not business studies, because I think it's safe to say that economics is the best social science you can learn to pursue any career in your life, and hence why if you look at any of the most successful CEOs in this world, they all have an economics background of some extent, as it lets you understand people and the world and markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Now I'd like to invite the second speaker from the proposing team to present his arguments.
Hi, thank you Pravina for inviting me. I'm really stuck. I'm really lost because when I saw the motion and I found out what side I was going to be on, I thought it was a trap. And so I read the question again and again and again. How are they going to catch me? How are they going to catch me? Oh, that's right. They're not going to be arguing that economics is useful. they're going to be arguing that it's evil. And my job would just be to rescue it from evil and bring it closer to useless by providing some nice things about it. But now, damn it. Been reading The Guardian too much. So, thinking on my feet, I'll try to come up with something. And so I'm going to respond to the first two speakers. I'll start with James. Thank you. So I want to talk about economics in the home, economics in everyday life. I tried to spend a year living the way economics papers tell me to live, and everything that I'm going to say is from a paper in economics. I'll just tell you a couple of stories, only two. The first one, well, I'm a finance professor. I teach finance, and there's a wonderful paper in the Journal of Political Economy about stability of marriage and finance. The author argues and finds empirical evidence in support of the following proposition. Families where the two spouses have diversified income streams, uncorrelated income streams, or negatively correlated income streams, stay together longer. This is really helpful for my life. Damn it, I married an economist. It's too late. So I went home, and we had the talk. And I said, look, we made this terrible mistake. How are we going to rescue this? We want to be married forever, but what are we going to do if the income of economists goes down? Or if the pound falls? Or if Britain does something completely stupid like Brexit? I suggested maybe one of us should move. We would still be economists, so there'd still be a little bit of correlation, but if one of us moved to France or moved to Canada, then at least we'd be able to hedge our currency risk, right? That'd be great. That'd be helpful. When one of us, if the pound went down, the other one would be doing fine. We could consumption smooth. That would be amazing. So I woke up really cold on the couch, and then I thought, damn it, I feel bad. But I went back to the paper, discounted sum of expected utility from consumption, market income. Those things haven't changed. I'm still eating the same dinners, I'm still making the same money. Why do I feel bad? This isn't in the model. Damn it. So we're going to move along to Christmas. There's a wonderful paper about Christmas, a wonderful economics paper about Christmas, the dead weight loss of Christmas, and it tells us that Christmas is completely stupid because we get lots of things that we don't like. And we buy lots of things that people wouldn't buy them for, don't like. And we'd be much better off if we just gave them money, gave them cash transfers. Note that this is the latest fad in development economics. Cash transfers. The idea, stuff is bad, money is great. So I communicated with my family, had some initial discussions first, family and friends, and said, look, we need some cash transfer mechanism. Gifts are stupid. I don't like any of the things that you've bought me so far. I'm sure you don't like any of the things that I bought you. When I go to the house, when I go to your house, your linens are not the one that I bought you. You're not using the steak knives that I got you. You clearly don't like the things that I buy. So I said, let's do cash instead. And then my finance professor started kicked in again. It always gets more dangerous when the finance kicks in. So I thought, well, if I'm giving my family and friends money, and they're giving me money, that exposes us to some unnecessary risk in transactions costs. Some of them live abroad, so there's currency risk. there's counterparty risk. What if they become unemployed or something and won't get any money, but I'll give them money? That'll be terrible. We have to write a check. Who does that? And cash a check or get cash out of all sorts of terrible things. So what I thought was, maybe we should engage in some netting arrangements. So we'll just call each other up in advance, early December. I'm planning to give you 100. How much are you planning to give me? Let's just subtract the difference. That'd be great. And then I thought, well, there's still a lot of bilateral exposures here. There's still some counterparty risk. Maybe someone's going to give me a lot more than I'm going to give them, and then I still might not get everything that I want from Christmas. So we decided we could anoint a kind of a Father Christmas, if you will, or a Father-centered counterparty for Christmas, or a Father Christmas-central counterparty. We couldn't find a FCCCP jersey, but we could find a CCCP jersey, so we thought that was appropriate. Sorry, that joke's really a bit weird. So we had our Father Christmas, we all paid them money, they ran off with it. That's the end of my economics in the household. It didn't work out for me. I'm going to move on to the bigger questions. So, how much time do I have?
About 20 seconds.
Okay. Okay. Actually, I might change track a little bit. I'm going to talk about opportunity cost. So, if you were going to say that something is as big a tenant as opportunity cost in economics, maybe it's the idea of marginalism. That's it.
You're going to have to wrap it up.
Okay. Okay. Well, just think about this. There's no reason to think that society is not producing enough economists. We're probably producing about the optimal amount of economists. So the relative cost of your training in economics is similar to the relative cost of your training in English literature. Society would benefit similar amount if it's at the optimum. I'm not saying that economics is useless, but your degree in economics is useless.
And lastly, I would like to invite Salman, the third speaker from the opposing team, to present his arguments.
So, I'd like to start off by just questioning the opposing side. Why are you in your discipline if you hate economics so much? And I was surprised to see that most academics at the back actually raised their hand when they were agreeing with the motion. So, yeah, it really makes me question why I'm pursuing this degree. That's besides the point. I'd like to make a reference to the first speaker that we had, Dr. James Warren, at the beginning of the talk, where he said, economics, useful. Economists, useless. So, at the beginning, I'd like to start off by saying that economics is a lens. It's a way that we can view the world, and albeit it is an effective one. To quote my econometrics professor from second year, time series, Mehdi, on average, with a certain set of assumptions, we are correct. But again, that comes with that certain set of assumptions. So you need to take that in mind and be aware that you're not going to be correct most of the time. So in the future, we could use economics to distribute resources in a way that's more timely and more efficient. Can intervention be useful in the future? Can automated systems actually help us in finding meaning with people's lives rather than, having people do arduous jobs that are more bureaucratic and input, blah, 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 same things to do every day and so on and so forth. But there are new fields in the field of economics that actually could be very helpful. Behavioral economics is one thing that has come across within the past decade or so and gained popularity. And the founder of this field, Richard Thaler, has actually won a Nobel Prize recently for his book, Nudge Theory, and many of his works with nudging. To give an example, he started off the book by saying, by giving the example of a cafeteria, a school cafeteria. Simply by moving the unhealthy foods away from sight, from the children, you could actually find the 40 to 50%, I'm not sure about the number exactly, but you could actually reduce the amount of unhealthy foods consumed by these children simply by moving it, not by increasing the price, not by doing anything else, just by making it less visually accessible. And that actually increased the amount of healthy food consumption.
Point of information.
Please do.
That sounds like a great contribution of psychology.
Well, again, behavioral economics tries to fuse psychology with economics. I'm not saying that economics has all the answers. It doesn't. But that's not the motion. We're trying to argue that economics is useful. Thank you for that point of rebuttal. Other new ways that we could merge other fields with economics is by using chaos theory, by using theories of complex adaptive systems. One of the main axioms that classical economics follows is that we have equilibrium, which in reality we don't. The economies are in constant states of flux. There is no equilibrium that we tend to follow, and most economies operate far from equilibrium. There are many unexplained dynamics and structures in economics, and we are in no way saying that economics has all the answers. One good example of a phenomenon that has increased efficiency, open source software. We're not claiming that economics invented open source software, but it's a way in which we can view marketplaces, not just of products, but of ideas, that could radically make products cost efficient. It could radically make the transmission of information a lot faster, and there would be new forms of value production, or better yet to say, a new Cambrian explosion, technologically speaking. So, to quote an anonymous source, I don't know who said this, but he said, new infrastructure often matures when separate solutions merge and the parts reinforce the stability of the whole. So, again, like when these separate systems keep operating up to a point where they can enlarge themselves and merge, then that's when we have more of an efficient and operating system. But to end, I'd like to say that economics can only remain relevant as long as it can provide deep engagement with the current and contemporary reality. Overly simplified models and problematic axioms cannot guide us forward. And on that note, I would like to say that economics is useful when taking those things into mind. Thank you very much.
So our economics is useless.
Everyone else's degree.
That was very exciting. The formal debate is now over, and it's your turn to ask questions if you have any. You may direct questions to the team as a whole or to a specific speaker. Please raise your hand to ask a question and also specify which team or speaker your question is directed at. Questions? Yes.
So for the group of lecturers, could you just provide a definition of economics in its simplest form?
That's a trap. Right? We're arguing against the motion.
Is that a declining comment?
No, I'll say, so it used to be that economics was a study of markets. And then we decided that economics was a study of the allocation of scarce resources. And now people think of economics as a study of human behavior, okay, which shows the limitless arrogance of our profession.
Okay, thank you. So economics is the allocation of scarce resources.
That's not what I said.
Is it not, would you not provide the conjecture that actually economics is developing over time? Like science, many scientific theories have once been disproved. Would you agree with the consensus that science is useless, just because that has adapted and evolved over time?
But remember, in my talk, I talked about how development economics, for example, is faddish. It's not that it's growing over time. It's cycling over different fashions, not learning from itself. Linda, you talked about how in the late 19th century, Ricardo showed that protectionism is bad. But it's back again. We can't even learn from the things that we've known for 100 years. At one point in time, we understood that austerity was not a good response to a financial crisis. But European central banks, that's still a widely used policy. So I don't see the learning from the mistakes that you see in other disciplines.
So you're saying that because it's so complicated, we should just give up?
No, I'm saying science is great. I'm saying sciences are great. Economics is not a science.
Can I just to square the circle on why we became economists? The only reason why anyone would do a PhD in a field is if you think that everyone else is doing it wrong. So we can hold both of these views and in a sense agree that progress is possible, but is in the present tense, and economics is useless.
Yeah, economics might not be in the future.
It's all on us.
Salman ended by saying, well, the problem with economic models is that they're too, they rely on assumptions that are too simple. I think exactly the opposite. I think our models should be simpler than they are.
You are only allowed to take questions from one.
Sorry.
Does anybody else have any questions to ask the speakers?
I got to ask this question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the weather forecast, so like
I'm sorry, whose question you're?
I'm questioning the economics is a useful thing.
Okay.
So before coming here, yesterday I checked the weather forecast, and then it was pretty accurate. I didn't need to take some actions that would hurt me in the future. But with the economics, they always make some forecasts. It always comes wrong, and it always hurts people. Like the Great Recession, they couldn't forecast the Great Recession, and they couldn't forecast any recent recession at all. What do you think about it?
Do you have
Well, the thing that I kept coming back to was, if you were to tackle the problems that we face, what would you use if not economics? And when it comes to our models, we need some basis on which to make some prediction. I mean, yes, it will not be accurate the vast majority of the time, but nobody has a crystal ball with which they can say with certainty that X, Y, and Z will definitely happen. And Dr. Bill Collier, who I was talking with earlier, said that nobody calls it a crisis because you saw it coming. It's
Arnold says something that in the beginning of his talk, he said that monkeys do better.
Monkeys do that. Well,
1 out of 3 times they would tell us that we're a recession and then they would hit it.
I suppose it could then go back to the point that economists are useless, but economics is probably useful.
Anybody else?
And on another note, I'd like to add a comment. Economists make predictions within a forecast, like a specific forecast error, like a margin. So we're not claiming that we have all the answers, but within a certain margin, that's what will follow.
But if the margin's so wide, what's the point?
Then that's the answer we can give, and we don't claim that we know everything.
Isn't it make it useless?
Any other questions?
No.
Yeah?
So, Alfred, you said in your question, and I quote, economics isn't useless, but your degree is. Could you please elaborate on that?
Howard's got a whiteboard marker. Yeah. So you got like economists and sociologists. And there's a production possibility frontier. And then there's like a social indifference curve. There's no reason at all to believe that we're not at the optimum. But here, there's no first order benefit of switching one sociologist to an economist or vice versa. If we move along this path at the margin, so if we just take one of you, sociologist, we're on the same indifference curve.
So what if you move
Sorry?
What if you move 2 of us from sociology?
That's a problem. Yeah.
But you would increase the value of economics.
Yeah.
I mean, back to your point, that would mean that you hold sociology in the same respect to economics. And I've talked to a certain economist, and he does not hold sociology in the same regard as economics. So do you?
Well, I'm a big believer, like, all economists should be in revealed preference. So society certainly seems to value sociologists. Great. So I take that as enough for me.
Can I rebut that? When I've been looking at job applications, they never asked, please have a degree in sociology. But they do sometimes ask in economics.
This might be a selection effect.
I've looked at a broad range of jobs, and yeah. So, would you like to? So that would mean that society holds economics in a higher standard than sociology.
It's a trap.
But yeah, I mean, we train fewer sociologists, so statistically speaking, you're going to see more ads with more quantitative subjects like economics. Those ads are often going to say that a degree in mathematics or statistics is also fine, or operations research or actuarial science, and I would agree that they're also, similarly useful. And if you had a degree in those things, then you would have just as good a shot at a job.
Could I add a comment? Maybe just to add a bit of modesty and humbleness. But stop talking about other degrees and how we're better than them.
No, I was just referring
Let's
to
remove this form of elitism that we have.
I mean, all of the other sciences trump us. So.
Yes, that is true.
So we have time for one last question, and I'll go with Tina and then I'll come to you.
Well, it's going to be a short one.
Yeah.
Well, when Dr. Lee spoke earlier, she mentioned something about robots replacing us, and seeing that we've all decided to pursue a career as economists and study it, what will become of us when robots take over?
We'll probably be serving to the robot overlord. Well, however much we like to try and confine in our lovely little models that humans will react, at least to certain stimuli in a predictable manner, unfortunately, we're not. And you can't program a robot to understand human nature. It's something that only we as humans can understand intuitively from one another. It's an emotional intelligence that you can't program into a robot. So I think you're safe. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
I think this is an area where we can actually learn a lot from historians. So in economic models, we find it very, very difficult to put in technologies that we don't yet know. And so then we certainly can't make any forecasts. But historians take a longer sweep of history, and there are very disruptive technological changes that have been observed in the past. And historians can tell us how societies have adapted and how we still have jobs and work today, even though these disruptions have happened in the past. So I know we have a historian in the audience, and I mean, I think this is an area where history is more useful than economics.
Okay. And the last question from the head of school.
Was simply to ask the proposing team whether or not they're prepared to disagree with the following statement. Economics as a subject and a discipline to study is a great vehicle to allow people to hone their analytical skills, their numeric skills, even if it's into lots of questions that appear real, but maybe only appear, is probably its greatest value, and therefore is useful.
I certainly spend a lot of time in my classes trying to teach a lot of calculus and programming, and that's so that at least you have something to fall back on.
Now that all of you have your questions answered and hopefully made your mind about the motion, let me take the final vote to see if the original vote count still remains. So would those who are for the motion or who think economics is useless, please raise your hand. Thank you. And and would those who are against the motion and who think economics is useful, please raise your hand.
I'm glad we're not wasting our time. I'd agree.
No, but I also feel like the academics did this on purpose, like just to make us feel better in a way.
And is there anyone who refrained from voting? The timekeeper is just finalizing the vote count, and we shall wait for him to give me the results.
While they're doing that, can I just say, I'd like to recommend, it doesn't sound like this was a danger, but if anyone found our talk extremely persuasive, I recommend watching this RES talk by Oriana Bandiera about what economists actually do. It's a great talk. It's a long YouTube video, but half of it is question and answer, so the first half is great. And if you're feeling a little bad about yourself and what you've done, this hopefully will make you feel a little better.
So the results are, I've been informed of the results, and I should say that this was a very entertaining debate, and all of you were amazing. The whole point of this segment is not about winning, but but more about having a good time discussing about a subject that we all really like, and also to know about what everyone thought in general. So instead of announcing a winner, I would like to call the team who garnered the largest number of votes as being the most convincing team. And that team is the students. Let's also give a round of applause for the lecturers team who are very I hope you have all enjoyed the debate session, and I would like to hand the stage over to Michael.
Thank you. Let's get another round of applause.